if you're an AppSIA member, so you can do that, today. You can go to the membership office right after this if you're not. So please do. I think it's around, and I don't want to give you the wrong price, but 55, but then with 10% off. So it's very, very affordable, and it is a great organization. We put on the conferences like this, and then there's monthly lunches and just a lot of networking opportunities. Okay. So what we do here is, if you're here for the credit, you'll need to be here for the entire time, and then you get your badge scanned at the end, right? We have a scanner back there, and we have Paul that's going to be helping out with that, and myself. And so we really are excited that you're here. Now I want to introduce Robert. Just to tell you a little bit about him, it's Robert Linton, and he's a business consultant in cloud DevSecOps. Mr. Linton's 40-year career in IT has spanned mainframe to the cloud. He's held various positions from developer to automation engineer to test manager to DevSecOps consultant. The past 2 decades, he's focused on automated Q&A and testing in both waterfall and agile methodologies. He's supported automated testing in a variety of industries. Mr. Linton is currently supporting DevSecOps efforts in the public sector, on-premise, and the cloud. So we're thrilled to have Robert with us, and I'm going to turn it over to him, okay?
Thank you, Mary. Is this mic on? Yes, it is. So good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us this morning. I look forward to a very interesting conversation with all of you, and I do hope that we have a dialogue. In other words, I could stand up here and talk for 8 or 9 hours, but you don't want to just listen to me. So, are you laughing?
I'm sorry.
She's my marketing person, so she knows that I could do it. So, but I really would like this to be interactive. So I'll have slides I'm going to talk to. I see one friendly face that I remember from previous conferences. So I have been coming to these conferences for years around the world, actually. Again, my name's Robert Linton, and I focus on our DevSecOps capabilities to support IT. I focus primarily on the Department of Defense and some IC, Intel community. And without any further ado, we'll get started. Well, it was working. There we go. So I support a part of our organization called ADM, Application Delivery Management, and this is our mission statement. Having spent over 40 years in IT, this mission statement is very near and dear to my heart. It means that we're here to ensure that the quality and the security of your application is instilled from day one. That's the goal. That's the mission. How do we accomplish that? We'll talk about that over the next hour or so. And we strive to provide a truly end-to-end application lifecycle management that is built for any methodology, any technology, and any delivery model. So people will say to me, well, we're doing this. Can we do it, with what you're talking about? And the answer is yes. So this is agnostic. It doesn't matter what tools you're using, what technology you're using, what application you're building. What we're talking about today applies to IT in general. So again, as I go through these slides, if you folks have questions, just shout them out, ask, raise your hand, and we'll talk about it. We all know it's a very complex IT landscape out there. Things are very convoluted. There's a lot of technology out there. Some of it's siloed, some of it's isolated. But we also know that everything is focusing on moving to the cloud. And as we move to the cloud, we have additional ideas and technologies that we have to deal with. Just this morning, I had a customer call up and say, hey, our product was working yesterday, it's not working today. Well, something in their environment changed. So the environment in which you're developing and deploying your systems will have an impact on the success of how well it's envisioned and used by the user community. We know that there's still mainframes out there. We know there's mobile applications, on-prem, off-prem, and hybrid. And then, of course, there's all those Internet of Things that connect in. So as you're building applications and your software and getting ready to deploy it, guess what? You have to test all of that. You have to test from A to Z. You have to make sure that if it's working on the on-prem, and you're going to make it also mobile, you got to test the mobile side of things. So that's why I say it's complex, it is changing, and it's going to continue to change. So you have to have a strategy and a process by which you're going to be able to continue to keep up with it, because it's not going to remain static. From now on, from today on, it's just going to constantly change. And what did I do? Okay. I'm still getting used to the little buttons. So this is just a slide I throw up there to kind of add to the clutter, if you will, because all of these are products that are out there in the IT world that some of you may be using. Some of them talk to other pieces of the IT infrastructure, and some of them don't. And you want to try to focus, in my opinion, you want to focus on those that will talk to each other, that will allow you to collaborate. But as you can see, you've got planning, developing, testing, delivery, and then operations. So that's that whole DevSecOps life cycle with the different products that fit in different markets. So there's a new term in the market today called value stream. Have any of you been talking about value stream, heard about it, value stream management? Value stream is a new way of saying, you know, we're going to do it the right way. We're going to focus on what's important to the customers. Over the years, they've had all different methodologies and techniques. Value stream is the latest one that says you have to understand what you want to build. You have to have a planning. You have to know what you're going to build. You have to plan how you're going to build it, how you're going to staff it. And then as it's being built, you're going to measure and make sure that you stay on track. Then you've got to develop it. And there should be a consistent process on how you go through that software development lifecycle. Then when you get ready to deploy it and release it, you want to have that automated as much as possible. I know everybody's not there today. Everybody is not in that state where they can just say, let everything go through the DevSecOps pipeline, the CI/CD pipeline. But that's a goal. If we can get to the point where we're comfortable with our processes and procedures, and we know that when something gets uploaded and we run a test and then we do a scan and then we're ready to deploy it into pre-production, that can be automated as part of your deploy and release. And then you get into the operation side where it's actually in production. If any of you want, I'm sorry, Mary, if they want a copy of the slides afterwards, can they get them from me or from you?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll figure that out afterwards. So I just don't want you to feel you have to take pictures of slides because I'm happy to share the slides. So now we're going to have a quiz. You all didn't know that 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock in the morning you're going to have a quiz, right? All right. So how many of you in this room have been developing software for at least 5 years? Only 2 of you? Then I guess there's not too many that have been doing it for 10 years. 1, 2. 20 years? 1, 2. Okay. 30 years? Anyway, I date myself because I've been developing software for 40 years. And back to the COBOL days when we were doing mainframe COBOL. And what we're trying to focus on is that in today's IT world, we're doing things faster, more creatively, with newer technology. But guess what? Under the covers, you're still doing a lot of the same basic principles. But some of the challenges today, because of the speed and the technology, is we're losing the visibility into what's happening across that development lifecycle. And we don't always have real good ways to measure. All of these are challenges for your IT organization. The technical debt. If you have a bad deployment infrastructure or if you have a bad technical design. But the two that we're going to focus a lot on today are the visibility and the measurement as you go through your software development. And then, of course, most importantly, if you don't build things that the customers want, they're going to leave. Now, in your world, you may have a captive audience because you have soldiers and sailors and airmen, but you still have, customer satisfaction issues that you probably want to deal with. So I throw this slide up here only to kind of reminisce for a second. So in 1997, when I got into this automated testing world, I drew this diagram on a whiteboard in front of a customer and said, this is what we're going to do. And this was, in my mind, DevSecOps in 1997. You have the planning phase over here. You have doors and caliber RM for your requirements. Then whatever the requirements are, go into the testing. The requirements go into the software development. All of these application environments don't even, well, SAP exists, PeopleSoft, but a lot of them don't exist, like CoolGen doesn't exist anymore. And then you map that into the testing, and then you do all the testing, and then you can put it out in production, and then you have to monitor it the rest of the lifespan. So this diagram, even though it's 25 years old, it was, in my mind, the predecessor to what we call today DevSecOps. So the point is, I've been focusing on this type of activity for 25 years. How to try to have an organization look at the entire life cycle and weave it all together. Because in a lot of IT environments, the planning gets done in one area, the coding gets done in another, security is over there behind a firewall. They don't talk to each other. They don't collaborate. This was my first attempt to collaborate and try to pull all that information together into one place. And I love this quote. A common disease that afflicts management all over the world is that our problems are different. Yes, to some degree they probably are. But they are different to be sure, but the principles that will help you improve the quality in the product are universal in nature. And that's what we're going to focus on today, is that there are certain things that you have to do regardless of what technology you're using or what software you're using, and those are universal in nature, and you can apply them to help improve the quality and lower the risk. So this is more, this was 25 years ago. This is what DevSecOps looks like today in a more modern diagram. And this is, again, somewhat generic, but you can see that we go through the planning phase with portfolio management, project management, portfolio management, finance management, all those things that are done at the PMO office. Then, as they get approved, you move into the lifecycle management. You want to have a lifecycle management approach that allows you to interface and connect with all these different other parts of the software development lifecycle. The coders doing work down here, the configuration management, source code management, your CI/CD pipelines, all your test execution ideally should kick off through a CI/CD pipeline. Or when those are done and the lifecycle management says it's ready to release to the next phase, you can have release management, automate that, and move it forward also. This is what we hope you strive for. I know most of my customers aren't here yet, but they're striving to get there, and they're getting further and further along. Again, don't be bashful. If you have a thought or a comment or a question, feel free to shout it out or raise your hand. So this is what we would like to see automated and integrated as much as possible. And you've probably heard of a term called shift left. Well, part of that whole DevSecOps safe, scaled agile framework for the enterprise is to shift work further to the left into that IDE box where the coders are, where the developers are, because if they can find a bug there, it's much faster and much less expensive to fix it there. And that's just not functionality errors. That's also security errors. So if I can find a security error when the person is coding it, that's going to save a lot of time and a lot of resources, including money, and vulnerability of risk. Because if that security vulnerability gets out over here into production, the ramifications could be a lot worse. So the security testing as part of the CI/CD pipeline, while it's still over here in development, is a big value proposition. And that goes back to what value management is all about. You want to try to make the best decisions earlier in the software development lifecycle to ensure that they don't escape into the production environment. So this is just another diagram to show how all the different parts of the DevSecOps lifecycle fit together into one continuous circle, if you will. They are this. Oh, we have some guests joining us. I'll let them get settled for a second. Welcome. So from any software development decision, it always starts with there's a demand, there's a reason to do it. And that reason of why you're going to go down this road to develop software and put something into your production environment normally starts with some kind of project portfolio management, then it goes through a lifecycle management, and then all the rest of this kicks in. At the end, what you're trying to do when it gets into production is to have the best customer value, the best customer experience that you possibly can, and accomplish the mission. If you've got great looking screens and lots of widgets, but it doesn't do the business functionality that they wanted, the business, the demand, you missed the mark. So we have to focus on making sure throughout the entire life cycle that we stay on track and we ensure that the requirements, the user stories, see, back when I was doing COBOL, it was requirements. Now today it's user stories, it's epics, it's features. They're synonymous in many ways. But you have to make sure that they get accomplished and addressed properly so that the customer value comes out the back end. I know there's a lot of talk about, is it really DevSecOps or is it DevOps? Well, I always like to include security as part of my discussion because, again, if you don't address it as part of that software development lifecycle, you stand the risk of something escaping into production and not addressing it or finding it or fixing it before you release into production. So I will always say DevSecOps, whether it's acceptable or not, and there's different schools, but I'm always going to say DevSecOps. So how do you accomplish all of this? You have to try to find a way to do your application lifecycle management such that everything is connected. And that may mean integrating with other products. In all of my last 25 years working in this field, I've always had the benefit of working with tools that integrate. They have open APIs. And they may not have a direct connect out of the box, but if you have people on your staff that know how to connect products through APIs or plugins, that's part of your goal. That's part of your strategy. Is if you have some kind of portfolio planning tool, but it doesn't talk to your application lifecycle management, you need to figure out a way to integrate that so that it can automatically send the information over, and the updates from the lifecycle can update the portfolio management so that they can get real-time metrics and results to see how the program or the project is progressing. So in the application lifecycle management solution, all of these things, which are part of the software development lifecycle, should come together in the application lifecycle management solution that you're using, and there are many out there. My goal is not to talk about any one product today. It's just to say there are many application lifecycle management solutions out there. They all do a similar type of thing. You just have to choose what's the right one for you and which one your organization may already own, and then determine how you can integrate all of the planning, the coding, and the testing into that application lifecycle management solution. Why? Because that's your main repo. That's your holy grail of information about that project, and ideally, every project in your organization. So in other words, excuse me. Typically, you're not doing software development for just one project. You have an enterprise, and you have dozens or hundreds of projects in play at any given time. And if you have the right application lifecycle management solution, that's an enterprise solution, it can bring all that information into one central repository, upon which the management and the project managers can make business decisions that are timely and accurate. If those 35 projects were each being run separately by different teams and they didn't have a way to bring all the information together into one repo, you're going to have some disjointed information. You're not going to easily make decisions at the project management level that you could if everything's in one lifecycle management solution. Oh, sorry, I keep hitting the wrong button. So again, why is it important to have that central application lifecycle management? Because you can't report on what you haven't measured. If you don't have a way to gather the facts of what's happening, how many defects have been discovered, how many have been remediated, how many user stories have been implemented in which phase or which cycle or which release, have they been tested, did the test pass or fail? all of these types of reports should be something you could get from your application lifecycle management solution. And if you can get these types of reports, then management can make decisions on how to maybe realign teams or how to increase teams that might be lagging. You got release process. I focus a lot of my time up here on quality, automation efforts. Again, as I said earlier in the presentation, you may not be doing a lot of automation today. Funny story. I started out 25 years ago automating tests for Y2K. How many are old enough to remember Y2K? But that's how I got into automated testing, because in '97 they said, oh, guess what? Come January 1st, IT is going to crash because none of the systems were built to roll over to the next year, meaning 2001 or 2000, Y2K. And so I spent 3 years helping IT organizations all over the East Coast test the remediation of their Y2K issue. And so that's how I got into automated testing. And we would not have been able to accomplish all the testing if we didn't automate it at that point in time. Because 3 years sounds like a long time, but when you're talking about hundreds of systems at a big organization that all has to be remediated, that's a large effort to do. We were working 3 shifts, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for the whole 3 years up to Y2K to automate the testing of all the changes for just that one thing, for the Y2K dates. But the dates were, all throughout the systems. So it wasn't just one field, it was hundreds of fields inside an application. So automation is very important. You also want to start thinking about, as you go through this, the ability to analyze those results so that you can determine what your risk level is. And a good ALM, application lifecycle management solution, will give you the ability to say, what is the risk of my deployment based on multiple factors? How many defects have been found? How many are still open? Well, if you found 100 defects and 90 of them are still open, you probably have a high risk factor if you think they're going to deploy that system next week. So that type of information can all be reported to you automatically through these KPIs and these types of reports that should be built into your ALM. Then, in a good ALM, you'll get this visual graphic. You'll be able to see this at the dashboard level. So that's another reason why you bring it back into one repo, into one central repository, because these graphs, though they're pretty and they're colorful, they're more than that. That's all the data about that application module. And those are not just colors. Those are live links. So if I hover over this, whoops, there's something underneath the, cushion. So if I hover my cursor right here on this red history, it'll automatically pop up a window that says, here's why it's red. This, and this. And then if you want to drill down, you just double click on it, and it will take you back into why is it red? What caused that module to have a red quality? And it will be probably some risky code, some security vulnerabilities, or some defects that still have to be addressed. Question?
So Robert, question for you. So when it comes to these dashboards, and we're talking about visualizations, how configurable are these based on businesses, right? So different businesses have different risk levels. So if I take, for instance, for our company, if I take in this dashboard in the middle, my red is different from somebody else's red.
Yes.
So how can we say that it's accurate enough to say this risk level is really on risk level based on business?
That is the question that most organizations want to address themselves, meaning, as the gentleman said, it's different. So the ALM solution has to allow you to specify what is your threshold for risk. What does risk mean to your organization? I always go back to security vulnerabilities and defects, but it's more than that. It could be a lot more than that. And you define it in the application lifecycle management solution. You give it the parameters, and so they're customizable. And all these graphs that you see here, every single one of them is customizable. Right now, you're seeing an X and a Y axis. That is what we had at that screenshot. But you can change those X, Y axes. You can filter There's a little button here, it's a filter button. So you can filter down what that person is seeing. So it doesn't have to be all the data for that project or that module. You can apply filters. And in the dashboard, you also have the ability to say, in an application lifecycle management solution, what is your job today? What is applicable to you? So when he logs in, he doesn't have to look at millions of lines of data. He can just say, this is what's on my scope today. This is what's assigned to me. This is what is applicable to me. And that allows him or her to focus on their job that day instead of looking at all the forest and the trees in the forest. They can focus on the 1 or 2 trees that they have to work on that day or that's important to them. So this is just an example of some of the graphs. And again, it's real-time data. It's not a snapshot in time. This is constantly being updated by the ALM product. So as defects get resolved, closed, user stories get moved into a new sprint. Question?
You're not talking about a specific product, it's just introducing that.
And yes, in this concept, I'm telling you that there are products out there on the market that do this. Now, I actually work for a company that does it also, but that's not the purpose of today's conversation. This is more to educate you that this is what's possible. This is the art of what's possible. And this is something, if you can't tell yet, this is something near and dear to me, has been for many, many years. It's amazing, I could make a career of automating IT for 25 years. Funny other story. When I started in '97, I said to myself, Robert, you better save as much money as you can because in 5 years, everybody's going to be doing it right, and you're going to be out of a job. You're going to be looking for a new job. And here I am 20 years later, past the 5 years, and I still find customers that haven't automated their tests. They're still running manual tests from Excel spreadsheets. Question, sir?
Hey, Robert, so what maturity level is an organization to have this sort of capability? It's not a beginning step. How far along would an organization be to get these to
You know, Frank, it's an evolution. Frank also is a colleague of mine.
I'm new to MSGS, so I'm learning.
But he's one of my colleagues. But the answer is, it's an evolution. You can have immediate value the first day you install something like this and start to use it. Now, you're going to customize it, and you're going to evolve it, and you're going to modify it over time. So it's going to evolve. So the maturity level of you and your organization leveraging tools like this will evolve over time. The Air Force is one of our customers at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. 6 months ago, they started with an application lifecycle management solution like this. They customized it over the last 6 months to be specific to their ERP CS applications. And now they're going production. Now they're moving it into production. They moved it into Impact Level 2 last week, and in February they're going to move it into Impact Level 4, GovCloud, OCI, Cloud One, and that's going to be available for anybody in Air Force. So it is an evolution. But the day that you install this and you start to use it, whether you move data into an application lifecycle manager or you start with a green field, the day one you start to see some of the value. Now obviously the longer you use it, the more mature you get, the more experience you get, the more value you'll get out of it. But it's very powerful once you have it configured and set up properly. So let's just talk a little bit about agile and specifically agile testing. So these are just statistics from the World Quality Report back 2021. I mean 2020, 2021. So these are just some of the percentages of organizations not being able to do agile testing. They don't have the transparency across the entire life cycle. They don't have a way to measure it. They don't have a agile test approach or strategy, and they don't have the best tool alignment. Another funny story. I got a dozen of them. Customer A calls me up and says, Robert, we've got tools that do X. And I said, okay. He says, we want to consolidate them into one application lifecycle management. I said, okay, we can help with that. He said, I said, so how many versions of that tool do you have? He said, well, it's worse than that. We have 5 tools that do the same thing, and we have 6 versions of those 5 tools that do the same thing, And now we want to consolidate it into one, and we want to integrate it into an ALM. And I said, well, the good news is we can help you get there, but it's a process. I mean, it's a heavy lift because you have to take all that data from all those disparate tools, move it down to one, the latest version hopefully, and then interface it with an ALM. But it can be done. It just has to be a process.
I'm curious about how that would, similar concept, I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to automate all of my process and processes and stuff like that with Power Apps, because that's what's available for me. And I'm curious if there is an actual ALM within the O365 structure.
Well, I mean, the answer is you can use one of the several products that are out there. Office 365 is just an environment, correct? And your applications run there, correct? So I was talking to a customer. I'm not going to name customers, but they have a lot of O365 applications that they want to test. And we showed them that they could use our solutions to do that. Test. Now, test is different than integrating to an ALM. Integrating to an ALM covers all the aspects of the IT. Testing is just one aspect of that software development lifecycle. So if you use a test tool and it has the ability to be integrated to an ALM, you build that link, and then you can say kick off the test, and when the test finishes, the results get stored back in the ALM. So you want to look for a solution that has that integration to an ALM that you're going to use. I mean, let's just face it. There's open ALMs out there. I don't think they're as robust as what we offer, but that's my opinion. But there's a way to do it if you have the right tool. Now, when you say Office 365, you're talking about Windows applications and maybe PowerPoint, PDF.
Basically, I'm looking at doing a lot of like flows and stuff like that, figuring out how to do databases and Power Apps and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, again, the tracking of it could be done in an ALM. The testing has to be done with a tool that will allow you to simulate the testing of that application. So we have functional testing, we have stress testing, load testing, and security testing. So those are the three major testing aspects that you might be looking at. My suggestion is just find a solution that will integrate with your ALM, hopefully out of the box. But even if it doesn't out of the box, as long as there's an open API and it can talk to each other, not every connection has to be bilateral, but ideally from a testing point of view, you do want it to be, because you want the pipeline to kick off the test to run, whatever test environment that is, and then you want the results stored back in the ALM because you want to know how many tests have passed. So we can talk about it offline if you like, but the short answer is you have to identify what test tools are going to work for your application and then how they'll integrate with an ALM that you choose. And it can be done. And there's multiple solutions out there, but be happy to talk to you. And that's part of the test tool alignment, is that sometimes people have a tool and it won't work for everything. So in other words, some tools only work for one environment. Let's say Oracle. Oracle has a testing tool called OATS. Guess what? It only tests Oracle applications. It won't test web, it won't test Power Builder, it won't test mainframe. It only does Oracle applications, ERPs to be specific. So, if you don't have the right tools to address everything in your enterprise, you might be a little bit limited. So, again, another reason why you want to have this all kind of integrate into that central repository is to improve that value stream visibility. You want to be able to see everything that's happening while it's occurring. One of the things that our customers have always asked for is this concept called traceability. An asset in your IT software development lifecycle has its own lifecycle, whatever that asset is, whether it's a test or a test step or a feature or an epic. You want to be able to trace that asset through the entire life cycle to see who's modified it, who's updated it, who's changed it. When was this happen? When did that happen? And so your ALM should establish that traceability that gives that ability to update those graphs in real time to show the statuses. That's a very important aspect of the whole integrated application lifecycle management. And it goes on around the circle. If you don't know what's happening, you don't know what the history's been, it's hard to plot a course for continuous improvement. You may not be able to scale. You're not going to get unified testing efforts. You're going to be disparate. You might not get the same results if different teams are testing. You want your test cases to be reusable. You want them to be an asset that could be used across multiple projects where applicable. So those are things to think about, which increases the value stream as you go through your software development lifecycle. And this just elaborates on the different aspects of the application lifecycle, how different aspects get pulled in. The release management. And if you have it integrated to the ITOM IT operations side, you can constantly monitor what's happening even after it's been deployed in production. So a lot of what I focus on is the pre-production side, the agile planning, the continuous testing, and the development phase. But all of those get integrated. So if you have all that integrated and you have all the sync points between the different tools, you can get a heat map like this that shows what is the quality, how many tests are being run through the pipeline. And the colors help you to graphically see all of these agree, which mean they've all passed. You can see how much code has been covered by each pipeline run. So you can visualize, if this is showing only 50% of the code is covered by test runs. Well, my mind, that says, what about the other 50%? Has that not been tested? Why hasn't it been tested? Probably because there wasn't a test case designed for it, and then if there's not a test case designed for it, it never gets executed. So in that 50% of code that hasn't been tested, now you have risk. Now you have the possibility of something getting into production that could cause you problems. So having all of this insight, and that's what we call it. We call it insight, allows you to do these things over here better, faster, and improve the process as you go along. This is just showing a pipeline activity, and again, you're not seeing a lot of green in here. Over here in the hierarchy, you see a couple of these modules are green, but the others are yellow, which means there's something wrong. You have to go look at it and figure out what's going on. So a good application lifecycle solution should show you graphically and by color how the progress is working. And then from the application lifecycle, you want to be able to assign it to a developer, to a manager, to somebody on your team, and they'll be able to say, this is now in my workspace. I have to address this. It's been assigned to me. So that all can be integrated as part of the application lifecycle also. Yes, hi. So problematic test. You probably have heard this expression. I only made one change to the code. Only one change. But that one change could affect not only that code, but hundreds of other modules that piece of code interfaces with. So problematic test really comes back to they keep making changes and it keeps failing. So why? Then you have to start using some of that insight to say why. So then you look at who the analyst is. You get back with the analyst that said this is what the business requirement is. In my experience, coders develop what they're told to develop to the best of their ability. But if they're told to develop something that's not accurate, guess what? You get something that's not accurate. So you have to kind of work backwards and determine, is it the code? Is it the test case? Is it the requirement? Is it the user story? Where lies the root cause of the problem? Then you have to remediate that. I once worked on an FBI system many years ago. pre-Y2K. They had walls of volumes of requirements. In this book, it said, the system shall do X. 2 volumes over, in the next volume, it said, the system shall never, ever, ever, ever do X. How do you code to that? The one coder is going to do X. The other coder is going to come back and say, well, we got to take X out. We can't do that. We should never do that. So there was a misalignment of the requirements. But having the visibility, who is the designer? Who is the coder? Who is the person that built the test case? That gives you visibility to work backwards to say, where did the problem really lie and how do we remediate it? So it's helpful information. And it's right there. It's real time. It's live. It's not like I have to go ask 6 people to find out. And you know, how do I say this delicately? It's a lot of power in here because there's a lot of visibility, a lot of information. Sometimes people get scared by that because it's like, they know everything I've touched. They know everything I've done. But yeah, but that's part of the job. And the result is you get better quality out the back end. So this is where I wanted to just talk a little bit about risk. And to your question before, you define what that risk score is by parameters. And here you can see that, you know, the system is recording 830 commits of code. 10% of them are risky commits out of all of them. And what that risky is defined as part of the parameters for your risk analysis. 8% failed manual test runs out of the total number executed. So this is a screen that just focuses on what is the risk analysis of your application today. And you can also look at it historically over a point in time. And you can see that they only have 48% of their tests as automated tests. So they have 52 that still could be, 52% that could be automated. Sir? From a security point of view, the answer might be yes. From an application testing point of view, I'm not sure. But certainly from a security testing point of view, it would be more of a parallel there. But again, this testing is also functional testing and performance testing. And I'm not an expert on RMF, but I don't think it has a lot to do with performance. Certainly it would be application, functionality and security for sure. It certainly wouldn't hurt to have this information available if they want to see it. How you integrate it, that's a different story. But the Army has asked for it a lot as part of their process. So how are we doing on time? I've lost track of all time. How are we doing on time? 10:45? Okay. So I just left this slide in here to show you that you can use different types of tools that you're using today. It never has been my statement or the company I work for to say throw out what you're using today, only use what we're using. So we integrate with some of these tools down at the bottom that you can use if you're using today. Selenium happens to be a big one. JUnit is another one. Cucumber for a business design development testing is a third. So again, not every tool will do everything you want it to. So you want to be able to integrate. You want to have the ability to integrate. If you have the ability to integrate those tests through your CI/CD pipeline, and it's an automated process, it's a process. Every developer, every tester doesn't have to know how the process was built. They just have to know, oh, I want to run my test today because I just uploaded code. They can press the button that says run, and the pipeline, the CI/CD pipeline, will do it for them. Because once it's configured, once it's there, it's reusable. Something else just popped into my mind. Oh, so that's if they want to kick it off manually. But in an ideal world, if you're Nike or Amazon or one of those big organizations that does 800 builds a day, and all of them are automatically tested, their pipeline kicks off all that automatically. When code gets uploaded, kicks off a job, runs a security scan, kicks off another job when the security scan passes, because if the security scan doesn't pass, there's no sense going down the pipeline any further to do any more builds. You want to go back to the IDE and you want to say, fix this before we do any more builds and testing. But if, let's say you upload the code, it passes the security scan. Now you do a functional test. Now you do a performance test. Now you're ready to do the next build into, let's say, pre-production or the next phase of the agile process. That can be automated when you get to the maturity level that Frank was talking about. But you don't have to do that from day one. On day one, everything can be a manual decision until you're comfortable that the process and procedures that you have built into your ALM will allow you to start automating some of those decision factors. And that's a workflow inside your ALM that you tie into your CI/CD pipeline. And then I just...
So, SBOM, is there a way with your current ALM infrastructure to implement SBOM?
I'm not exactly familiar.
Software bill of materials. It's basically it's a way to account for the dependencies on the application. So if you have you're getting log4j type of logging on your Delta application, there's a way to account for all your dependencies that allows you to mitigate potential open source attack on these open source modules. So the question remains is, that's the definition of SBOM, which account all the
Bill of materials. Okay.
So if you would talk about automated testing, would that be towards the end, or would you try to suggest shifting more to the left as we start to build before we start to build software?
The answer is you should start testing the minute you start uploading code. Shift left.
Okay. So is that more the building? Is it not when before the actual developer starts? Because if I'm a developer and I have a desired open source application that I want to put into my application beforehand, then that might exist vulnerabilities, and as it goes down the pipeline, the vulnerability exists.
It does make sense. And that's why that first couple of slides I had up there, where it's like a crazy field of all these things that are integrated and talking to each other, that's exactly what you're hitting on, is that everything seems to get more and more connected. To address it, you can do what we call service virtualization. So service virtualization gives you the ability to say, I'm going to build a system, and it's going to need to go out and talk to 6 different systems that are already out there. Maybe they're open source systems. But as I'm going through development, I don't necessarily want to interact with those real things that are out there. I want to simulate my interaction and my developer's interaction with those things over the software development lifecycle until we get near the end where we do full integration testing with them. And at that point, we take that service virtualization out of the software development lifecycle and we put in the real system or the real application that we want to go hit. And it's a very important part of your software development lifecycle because, again, you don't want to ignore the fact that as you go through your software development, you're going to have to interface with these other applications once you go live. So you want to build that into your lifecycle earlier and simulate it with something called service virtualization. When I was a coder, many, many dark moons ago, we called that a stub. So we would stub it out. We would just say, I'm going to go call this, and I'm going to come back. And we would just make it a happy path. We could say it came back and it's good. But with service virtualization, you can actually do more powerful things. Like you can say, well, I handed off to the other service, and I got back bad stuff. Now how's my code going to interact with that? The sooner in the software development lifecycle that you can test that at the coder level, at the IDE level, the better it's going to be. And if you can build reusable tests so that as you move through your software development lifecycle, they are reusable from phase 1 to phase 2, phase 3, phase 4. You build up test collateral, and you have assets that you can lean upon. Nobody should be reinventing the wheel if there's something they can reuse that works for the purpose it's supposed to do. So we want to make sure that we have end-to-end quality and governance throughout the life cycle. We want to be able to test in one tool, manage all your application lifecycle efforts in one central repository, and get that real-time insight into it. Traceability graphs, like I said, are very important because you want to make sure that everything is covered. You want to make sure that every object that you have as part of your epic, your feature, your test case, you want to make sure that its life cycle is full and has been leveraged for why it's there. So you have test cases You don't want to have test cases that were never ran, because then you have to question, why did I build a test case? Normally, you build a test case to verify some functionality or some aspect of the system. So if you have 100 test cases at the end of your life cycle that have never been run, that's a risk factor that you have to ask, why? Why did I not run those test cases? So you want to be able to see, and all this is trying to say is that if you have a lifecycle tool that gives you these out-of-the-box traceability widgets and graphs, you want to be able to customize it. This is an example where you can switch what the X and Y axes might be and what the graph or the widget's going to show you when it actually comes up in the dashboard. So a lot of flexibility, a lot of customization that you can make, but you can use it right out of the box as you get started. This is what I've talked a lot about and always talk about, is that you want to see the linkage of runs, the features, the backlog items, the requirements. And a good application lifecycle management tool, you want to try to be able to do waterfall, waggle, and agile if you can, because more and more applications are moving from that waterfall methodology into more of an agile, and sometimes they kind of stall in the middle, so they're kind of waggle. They're still doing some waterfall stuff, but they want to do more agile. So you want to be able to keep track of all of that and have nice graphs that tell you, like this backlog item, there's 4 tests that were assigned to it, 2 defects were found, and that's why one of the tests failed. But you want to have all this information at your fingertips wherever possible. Question? I thought I saw a hand go up. And before I finish, I want to just make the point that if you're not including security scanning as part of your software development lifecycle, you're just asking to shoot yourself in the foot, in my opinion. So with a good application lifecycle management solution, you should be able to interface with whatever security product you're using and pull that information back into your application lifecycle solution to know what level it is, where it is. Like right now, this is saying that, we found a vulnerability. It's a very critical one. It's got something to do with, passcodes. It's still in the existing stage, hasn't been closed, hasn't been remediated. And, if you have a good integration, it'll tell you where in the code and actually give you a link to that security scan report that says, this is why we found it, this is what it is, and that product hopefully will tell you how to remediate it. So not only do you want to identify that there is an issue and know where it is and what piece of code so that you can assign it back to the developer to get it fixed, but you want to know where in the code it is, and you want to know maybe some suggestions on how to remediate it. So all of this should be an integratable solution in your ALM and your software development lifecycle. So please, please, don't forget that you have to have, as part of your DevSecOps, the security scanning. I mean, this is what scares me at night, is that 3,662 vulnerabilities were found in this application. Now, are all of them real vulnerabilities? Probably not. But you have to have a way to determine that and then deal with it and work it and resolve it. And this is a real screenshot from our R&D. So our own R&D uses our products so we eat our own dog food, drink our own Kool-Aid. That's a good thing, because that way we make sure that our products work for us and work for our customers. And then, if you find a vulnerability, you can bring it back into your ALM solution. You can assign it to a developer. You can select who the owner is. You can identify who detected it, who did the scan, and you can make all these changes. You can change the priority, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of data that can be collected. And this just says that the security scan found a critical SQL injection into the assignment's Java. This needs investigation. For details, go to this issue number in the security scanning tool. And this is normally a hot link, which means you can click on it and it'll take you into the other product and show you what the other product found. So that's good. I'm going to go through these real quick because a lot of it is is just a kind of summary of what we were talking about. So how do you achieve agile at scale? You got to have speed, scale, and security. If you don't have all three, you're going to have issues before you go live. You got to be able to do all three simultaneously as you evolve, as you grow your process. You want to try to address these things on the left-hand side so that you have a better management of your software development lifecycle. This was a quote I found when I was going through some research. There must never be a trade-off between code quality and speed. And that's true today as it's ever been. Just because we can do agile doesn't mean we're going to get it right just because we're going faster. We have to ensure that the quality and the security and the business value is there as we learn to develop faster and develop code into production faster. So make sure we marry that together. We happen to support Application Lifecycle Agile. We're a partner with the SAFE organization that allows you to have projects at any level in the organization. Just curious, out of my own curiosity, how many of you have SAFE or use SAFE? Any? Not many. But this whole presentation today is agnostic to what approach you use for Agile. The principles, the concepts, everything we've talked about is applicable no matter if you're using Kanban or SAFE or whatever, or Scrum. You can do the exact same things that we've talked about today with any of those approaches to your software development lifecycle. This just shows you the Agile board in the product, and this just shows you the fact that you go across multiple teams and multiple demands. And the red line is like a line drawn in the sand. This is how much we've committed to the next release, everything down to the red line. But in today's world where teams are all over the country, all over the world, having a tool that allows you to collaborate with geographically dispersed teams is advantageous to your organization also. And again, here, we can see that we've got some risky code commits into our repository, and we have some potential vulnerabilities that we want to look at as we get ready to move into production. This just shows the dependencies between the different parts of the Agile life cycle. So you're in one release, and there may be dependencies for things down the road, or things down the road have a dependency back to features that haven't been completed yet. So you do have the ability in a good Agile ALM solution to show the storyboard and how things go through. Waste time. That's probably the biggest delay in these Agile projects is waste time. And that can be defined in many different ways. But you can see here the different colors. You got pending review. So you just submitted something to be reviewed. Now it's waiting for somebody to look at it and accept it and approve it. Well, that's waste time. That's delay in the software development lifecycle. And again, not to speak out of school, but this is real information from our R&D. These are projects that we worked on internally. And you can see that lack of the environment could be part of the wait time. Maybe they have to do a redesign, and then there might not be another vendor like that open source that we have to go to available to continue. So these are things that could cause you to have delays and slippage in your timeline. So you want to be able to, first of all, you won't know about this unless you're tracking it and you have a way to measure it. So you have to be able to track it, you have to be able to measure it, then you can analyze it, and then you can remediate, how do I improve the process? Goes back to the other question Frank left. Oh, Frank's back there sitting down, I didn't see him. But that helps you to remediate and improve your process on how you're going to continue to analyze and to not have this waste time in the future. So that's how you do the continuous improvement. And just a few stats. 58% of Agile teams have professional quality engineers integrated. 58% have achieved reliability of systems through test automation. 60% of Agile teams have test automation implemented, etc. taken 25 years to get to this point. And that leaves 40% of those agile teams still need some automation done. So there's life for me after today. I'll still have a job. I can help some of those other 40% of those teams complete some of their work. So what do we want to do coming out of this? We want to plot a course for continuous improvement. You know, we still want to have the speed, and we want to deliver the software in increments because that's part of the CI/CD agile pipeline capability, but it helps you to do what? If you're developing and delivering often, what does it also mean that might happen? You're going to fail faster, right? Failure is not a problem. Failure is not an indication of you or your team. It means something needs to be adjusted. But if you're doing it and you're finding it faster and you're realizing it sooner in the software development lifecycle, that is a positive thing. So you'll often hear people speaking about Agile say, you want to test earlier, you want to fail often because you want to improve it earlier in the software development lifecycle. You don't want to wait 6 months into the project to find out, oh, now we got to go back to square one and redesign that aspect of the application. That's huge rework. That's costly time-wise and manpower-wise. And again, I can't emphasize enough. You have to be able to measure. You have to be able to gather the metrics. You have to have traceability. And you need to be able to report on it. Another nice thing about these graphs, they should be exportable and they should be publishable. So in other words, in your organization, you could take these out of your ALM, put them up there on a SharePoint, and then with the right engineer, you can make that a live link so that every hour it goes back and pulls the latest data. So when you publish it to SharePoint, it may not be as real time as it is in the actual tool, but you can design it to say, I want to have it updated every hour or every day. That way management doesn't have to go into your ALM tool. They can just go look at your SharePoint site or whatever and say, what is the status of these projects? And that's about it. These are just some other pretty graphs that talk about the different life cycle phases across releases. I thought this was an interesting article in the Forrester report, August of 2022. If you use automation, you can get 241%. You can avoid downtime, and you can save on your developer time savings. How is all of that gain possible? Well, it's part of these things that we just spent the last hour talking about. You get all of this implemented, you'll start to realize some of this. And final takeaways, you need to integrate, you need to automate, you need to measure all along the life cycle from day one. You have to analyze what you've measured, you have to report on it, and then eliminate waste time. And that's it. Questions? Any additional questions? One.
So going back to one of your goals is OData, and you're trying to integrate OData to collect business intelligence type of data. I just want to understand the infrastructure. So you're talking about when you collect these measures and data, do you have a backend that is implemented within the ALM to collect it and do that correlation, or is it more so an outsourcing API and then you return back to the correlation?
Well, what we're referring to is you can take the information out of ALM and make it any kind of report you want using OData. So you can extract the information out of the ALM, put it through the OData, and make it whatever report format you want it to be, in addition to what's already there. I mean, there's Excel, there's Word, there's the graphs, the dashboard. But if you have to do more, you got to take the raw data out of the ALM product. You can take it out and then work it through the OData.
That's not embedded into is that embedded into the entire ALM? That's going to be the infrastructure that you're going to implement to your customer. Because if that data is within ALM, I use OData to collect that information and do that correlation, right?
Yep.
So meaning that you have a database somewhere within that ALM infrastructure, right?
There's two databases inside our ALM. One is SQL or Oracle. That's just for the real assets. But the insights, the analytics, all of that crunching is done by Elastic.
Okay.
So Elastic, If you think about it, it's a great question because most tools are just data in, data out. And, you know, you can pull up what's there. You can pull up what's stored. But that's not real time. That's when it was stored. So now, using Elastic under the covers, a good ALM product will be crunching and analyzing and merging all this information so that you can get those real-time analytics on the dashboard that have meaning, that have data behind them. They're not just pictures from the last time you ran the report. That's live, real information of what's happening at that moment in time. That only occurs with analytics under the cover, and we use Elastic to do that. When you talk about value stream, that's also a big part of value stream is that the organization wants to see all of this information real time. It's got to go through an engine. It's got to go through an analytics engine to be able to give you the data in a meaningful display that means something to your organization. It's not just, you don't want to just see the raw data because that could be thousands of pages of just raw data. You want to see what it's been analyzed to represent and show me, and you get to determine what that is. You get to configure it so it's meaningful to your business. Because what's meaningful to my business may not be meaningful to yours. So you have to have that ability to customize it. I'll be around the next 2 days. We have a booth over in the middle of the show over here on the show floor. If you'd like to come by and just chit-chat, say hello, I'd love to talk to you, meet you again. Yeah. We got some tchotchkes you can have, but more importantly, I just like to get to know all of you. So thank you for spending your morning with me. I'm very pleased that all of you showed up, and if you want my contact information, I've got a card. You can ask me for it if I didn't give you one already. And feel free to ask me any questions down the road. You can email me, call me, text me. That's it. Enjoy your conference. Enjoy Hawaii. Can I go home to the beach now? Am I done?
Do you know what the booth number?
Yeah, booth 6:30.